this important? Well, the first anti-ulcer disease drug that came out cost about $1,000 a year. Usually you had to take 2 courses, $2,000. That's a lot of money. But it wasn't as much as the surgery. The surgery was $25,000 and you had to be out of work for a while. So there's a big, big difference in cost when you can take a pharmaceutical. So when innovation is halted, that means cost goes up because instead of paying for the drug, you pay for hospitalization or surgery. And breakthrough drugs especially are not developed. Let me tell you a true life story. I was working on prostaglandins for liver disease. And I filed a patent. You know, we had gotten into the phase where you had to get patent protection for these things by that time in my career. And the FDA examiner for my section actually called me up, which is very unusual, and said, Dr. Ruwart, we understand you have a patent for prostaglandins and liver disease that's been filed. I said, yes, that's true. That's what my research shows. They said, oh, we are so happy to hear this because so many people die of liver disease and there's nothing. We have to prescribe bed rest. That's it. That's the best we can do. So we're really excited about your new drug and we're going to do everything we can to help you develop it. Wow, I thought maybe we have a chance here. But you know, that didn't mean they were going to waive the regulations. No, that just meant they'd look at our data sooner. Well, you know, liver disease, especially the kind we were dealing with, chronic liver disease, you know, for like from alcoholism, HIV, well, of course, HIV wasn't around too much then, but hepatitis. What that does, it takes a long time to develop. And, you know, basically the liver gets all scarred. So it takes a long time for that scar tissue to go away. So we knew we were going to have to do a study that lasted several years in order to show the effectiveness of our drug. And, you know, some of these people, if they're alcoholics, aren't always compliant. You know, they don't always take their drug. So we had to back off a little bit and add more people so that we could get the statistical significance that the FDA required. You had to have so many people in the study to have that. And we didn't know what dose we needed. Nobody had ever cured liver disease before. We were breaking, you know, new ground here. We weren't sure what to measure. And if we guessed wrong on any of this, we'd have to start over because we had to have the statistical significance in 2 US studies in order to market this drug. Well, by the time we calculated the time course, if we had had to start over, we quickly realized that unless we guessed right the first time, this drug would be off patent by the time it got to market, which meant it would go generic and we'd never recover our costs. So the company, probably wisely, although it broke everyone's heart to do it, decided not to develop it. This is how new innovation gets killed in today's regulatory market. Silently. Nobody knows. And how much does that cost us? The next slide does a calculation on this to see. And basically, again, I'm going to just ask you to look at these bottom 2 lines. What we're doing is we're estimating how many people are affected or how much money it costs, depending on if you think these missing drugs are 25, 50, or 100% as effective as the ones that are now on the market. And as you can see, the numbers are staggering. Even if you assume that the drugs that we're missing from innovation are only 25% as effective as the ones we have now, that's another 4.1 million people. If you think they're 100% as effective, these new missing drugs, then we're talking about 16 million people. You know, 3 to 4 times what loss of life we've experienced just due to the delays. So you can see the innovation component is a very big component of this whole thing. It's rarely measured, rarely talked about. And of course the cost, the money cost of having to turn to surgery or hospitalization. If you go to the next slide, you can see I've summed this up for you because we don't have time to go into all the numbers, but basically 25 to 55% of today's healthcare costs are directly related to the loss of innovation that we experience due to the 1962 Kefauver-Harris amendments. That's huge. If you want to bring healthcare costs down, it's easy to do. In fact, the next slide has a quote that I really like by William Wardell, and he says that even one new drug, the stature of penicillin or digitalis, has been unjustifiably banished to a company's back shelf because of these excessive regulatory requirements. That event would harm more people than all of the drug toxicity in the history of modern drug development. And you know it's happened. You know it's happened, just from the little bit of example I've shared with you. So now if we go to the next slide, you can see where we got all this information that I talked about earlier about accounting for how these regulations account for 80% or more of current drug costs, have made drugs less safe, have slashed innovation in half, have shortened the lives of about 20% of our population that have died since these things were put in, and have probably doubled general health care costs. I like the next slide where Dale Greninger in the Wall Street Journal says that economic studies have been virtually unanimous. FDA regulations certainly cannot be proved safe and effective, thereby flunking their own criteria. But you know, it gets worse. Yeah, it just gets worse. The next slide really goes into it. You know, we talked about the folic acid story being the American thalidomide. It's very difficult to even get an estimate of this, but you know, proper nutrition is so important. At the Upjohn Company, what we had to do to make our animals sick was to take their vitamins away. Why? Because we titrated their diet very carefully, made them very healthy, and we couldn't make them sick. We had to take their vitamins away. That was the only way we could make them sick. Now that should tell you something. Like maybe we don't have enough vitamins in our diet. Maybe that's it. But the problem is, if you want to promote a vitamin for a particular disease, and there are many in which the vitamins work very well, and the drug companies used to manufacture them and promote them, but all of a sudden they couldn't do it because if they wanted to make a claim of effectiveness, they had to jump through all these hoops and pay all this money, and they couldn't patent the vitamins, so they couldn't do it without it going generic the first day. Now, you might imagine that if we had the proper nutrition, that the problems we have from alcohol, for example, wouldn't exist. In fact, part of my work was showing that you could prevent most alcoholic liver disease by simply beefing up the nutritional mix that your animals took. And this is true actually even in primates, so it does apply to humans. And if you know anything about drug development, you know that most drugs that you take today are actually mimics of natural substances. They're longer acting substances in your body, or vitamins. They take a vitamin or they take something that's in your body and they change it chemically so they can get a patent and it lasts longer in your body. And that's what most drugs are today. So think about if you could use a natural substance, much cheaper. And of course, we can rarely study them or do anything with them because we can't make those claims. Now, in the next slide, you can see something that really should give all us political activists heart. When the FDA tried not only to just deny vitamin manufacturers the ability to make claims, but actually started getting pretty aggressive about working with them and trying to say that all nutritional supplements had to go through the development process, there was an outcry from the public. Which actually resulted in the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act, which was passed in '94. Congress got the largest citizen response they ever had. People who take vitamins really know about liberty, in that sector at least. They should be prime targets for us. They hate the FDA. And this was passed, and what it does is it categorizes supplements as food, not drugs, and that means that the FDA can't push them through the drug process. But this is actually being threatened, as shown in the next slide. There is actually an international harmonization effort underway called Codex, which is a joint product of the United Nations, World Health Organization, and Food and Agriculture Organization. And they're developing these guidelines through the WTO, the World Trade Organization. And they've already been adopted in Germany, and the EU is being pushed to adopt them. Now the next slide shows what these regulations do. They limit the amount of vitamins that you can buy without a prescription. In Germany, if you go over these amounts, you got to get a prescription, got to go see your doctor. Now any of you who take vitamins in this room know how crazy this is. I mean, vitamin C, 225 milligrams. Linus Pauling took 10 grams a day, 10,000 milligrams, okay? I take about 2,000 milligrams a day. Yeah, 4,000. Vitamin E, a lot of us take around 800 international units a day because that's what's